Harley-Davidson Pan America is a motorcycle that feels like it's been a lifetime in the making. From the original teaser shots to the press launch that happened the other week, it just seems to have been a bike that has taken so long to arrive. Thankfully for us though, when we actually got to ride the thing on the launch in Wales, it was well and truly worth the wait. Billed as a BMW R1250 rivaling adventure motorcycle, to really sample this bike, we had to give it a proper road test, an on and off-road review. So Harley-Davidson sorted us out a day at Lake Vyrnwy riding on-road on the roads around there in the west coast of Wales, and then an afternoon spent at the Mixed Extents Adventure Centre testing the off-road capabilities of Harley's first modern-era adventure motorcycle. Before we get into the review proper though, just a little bit of housework that I need to do. There are two versions of the Pan America that you can go out and buy. There is the special that you see before me here, and there is the standard. Now the standard comes in at £14,000 and the special comes in at £15,500. The main difference between the two bikes, aside from some different trim details and badging changes, is the fact that the special gains electronic suspension, semi-active, and also an Olin steering damper. And that electronic suspension means that you can unlock the extra feature of the Pan America, which is a world first for Harley-Davidson, in the adaptive ride height. So that gives the bike the ability to drop down from its normal ride height when you're riding to a lower ride height when you come to a stop, before moving back up to its normal ride height when you start again. So I suppose the place that we need to start with this bike is to really talk about the engine. That Revolution Max 1250 engine, and it is really the most advanced petrol motorcycle engine that Harley have created in the modern era. Some headline stats on this one. So it's 1252cc. It kicks out 150 bhp claimed and 94.4 pound-foot of torque. These are figures and these are numbers that we don't normally associate with a Harley-Davidson, but they had to do this to take the fight to the other manufacturers, KTM, Ducati, BMW especially, and Honda in the adventure bike field. It's got the primary balance of a 90-degree V-twin in the compact shape and form of a 60-degree V-twin. It's got variable valve timing as well. It's a really high-tech engine with a lot of technology packed into its casings that we've never seen before on a Harley-Davidson. On the road, the engine is extremely refined. It's got a gentle nature low down, and at tick over you wouldn't really think that it was a 150 horsepower motor. And again, when you get out on the road and you're in the lower riding modes, the rain and the normal road riding modes, it's perfectly compliant. In fact, it's a really easygoing engine to get along with. And then you flick the bike into sports mode, and it doesn't just change the engine character, the delivery of the engine and the power output and the throttle map. It also changes the electronic suspension. So the bike hunkers down a little bit at the front and the back end comes up a little bit of extra preload, and it completely transforms the bike. It turns into a proper sports adventure bike when you stick it into sports mode. As is the way with any adventure bike in the modern era, this thing is chock full of technology, not just in the engine, but also in the TFT dash, which is really clear, easy to read, and extremely uncluttered. So you've got riding modes galore, and you can drill down into those riding modes and change all the different settings within them. It is a real smorgasbord if you are a fan of technology on motorcycles. But the thing that really impressed me on the launch, and this was something that was echoed by a few people that were riding the bike on the day, was how discernible it is when you change between the riding modes on this bike. Quite a lot of the time you can change riding modes on a bike and you can't really put your finger on what has changed or how it's changed the delivery of the engine. On this bike it is totally obvious. You can go from rain mode, which gives you a restricted bhp, a really soft throttle map, and nice compliant supple suspension, and the bike will feel like an A2 47 horsepower bike. It almost feels like anybody could get on that thing and just ride it and enjoy it and take it out for a spin. And then as you go up through the levels, you can really feel the Revolution Max engine changing in character and changing in delivery. And it just totally transforms the bike as you flick through the riding modes on the switch cubes of the handlebar. It's a really impressive bit of kit on that front. So we can't really talk about the bike without talking about its handling, and we had a really good opportunity to sample both the on-road and the off-road handling when we went over to Wales. One of the things that impressed me was not just the riding modes and how they changed the character of the bike and they changed the way that it felt on the road, but we were riding off-road on the same tyres that we'd ridden on-road that morning. One of the things that really impressed me on the launch of the bike was how we were riding on the road in the morning. It was really, really wet. It was quite cold. It was quite windy, and we were riding up over the top of some quite tall mountains. And it was handling everything that we could throw at it. And you were never really having any heart-stopping moments. It never felt like you were close to the edge or that you were in trouble. The bike had always got you back on that front. But then we took it to the Mick Exton's Adventure Experience, and it's in an old disused slate mine. You've got lots of fire trails, you've got big rocks that you have to climb over, and we were riding on the same Michelin HD branded Scorcher tyres, and they'd done everything that they did on the road and performed well. And then we went there and they were thrown really where they should have been, way out of their comfort zone, and they performed just as well off-road. It was really impressive. If you wanted to go further off-road, you could spec the bike up to have some more aggressively grooved off-road tyres. But really, I think for the people that are going to be riding this bike, the people who are going to be mainly riding off-road and then maybe tackling the odd green lane or going on some milder adventures, these would be absolutely perfect for the job. Another factor of the bike's handling is, of course, the electronic suspension. Now, electronic suspension can do one of two things. It can either nullify the ride and it can sanitize the ride so much that you feel disjointed from the experience and that you don't quite know what's going on beneath you. A magic carpet is nice when you're cruising down the motorway, but when you get onto a B road or you take the bike off road, you really need to feel what's going on beneath you. Or there's the flip side of that coin. An electronic suspension can try and work too hard, and when you can feel it adjusting the bike on the move, again, that's kind of not what you want. You really want it to be sort of tucked away in the background without really knowing it's there. And that Harley-Davidson have done a really good job of tuning the suspension on the Pan America. It is so good that you don't even know that it's electronic suspension. You've still got the natural dive on the brakes and the squat under acceleration that you'd have if the bike had conventional suspension on it, but it just gives it that air of authority when you put it into a corner, and when it's wet, that it knows exactly where it needs to be and exactly what it's doing. It's a £1,500 option on this bike. For me, it would be an option that I would stump up for, and that's simply because it then enables you to add the adaptive ride height control, which I think is a £700 option to the bike. That again is another feature that you can't actually perceive it working when you ride the bike, and I kind of thought before the launch that I would be able to feel it doing something. I was totally wrong. You start off and you've got your feet, the toes of my feet were basically flat on the floor on either side of the bike. You begin riding and you don't feel the bike move, you don't see it, you don't feel it, you don't hear anything at all. But when you're riding along, if I was then trying to dangle my legs back down to the floor, I wouldn't be able to touch the floor. It's really, really very impressive. And it's one of those things that when you put it on a bike and it works so flawlessly, you kind of think, why hasn't anybody done this before? The adaptive ride height control, you can go into the settings on the TFT dash and you can change that. So if you're riding off-road and you don't want it to drop down quite so slowly, you want it to drop down right as you come to a stop, you can set it all in there. Or if you want a more gradual decline down on the suspension, it can sort that for you. So it's a fully adaptive system that you can manage through the bike's TFT. Going to just go on and talk about the comfort. So we didn't spend it wasn't a whole 8.5 hour epic of riding the bikes, but we were out on the road for a good sort of 5-6 hours, maybe 6.5 hours. I'd already ridden the Harley-Davidson Pan America prior to the launch in Wales. I spent a full day riding one around in the east of Wales, which was all on road. And from that initial ride that I did with Harley-Davidson, I already knew that the comfort of this thing was going to be very, very good. The seat is extremely plush. The lower body ergonomics are so roomy. You feel like the BFG could get on this thing and completely feel at home on it. The bars sweep back to meet you really, really nicely. And the riding position overall is just ever so neutral. Again, as well, it's got a really, really nice roomy pillion seat. The pegs on the pillion seat as well, because I have tried them out, are nice and low, and there's plenty of grab handles for your pillion to grab onto. So I just want to talk about the windscreen very quickly. That is a 4-stage adjustable screen that you can do on the fly. It does tend to wobble around a little bit in the wind. I did notice that both times that I've rode the Pan America previously, that it does sort of seem to flap about a little bit. It doesn't affect the protection that you get in any way, shape or form. It's still a nice bubble for you to sit under. The only real gripe with the adjustable windscreen is it can be a little bit of a faff to get your hand to it to change it on the fly. You are actually better off doing it once you've come to a stop at a set of traffic lights. But you don't need to crack out the Allen keys, which is always a bonus in my mind. So what do we like about the Pan America? The engine is a standout feature. 150 horsepower in any adventure bike opens the door to so much more than just off-road adventures. It means this thing is a really, really capable and very well-spec'd sporty adventure tourer. The other thing that has impressed me is the comfort, the riding position, the long distance comfort on it. You can spend full days on this bike and feel absolutely perfectly fine as well, which is great. The third and final thing that I find very impressive is the electronic suspension, the way that Harley have got that system tuned up, and the fact that they've included something which we've never really seen in the motorcycle market before on any motorcycle, I think is a massive, massive bonus. I mean, being able to touch the floor on a big adventure bike is one of the biggest barriers to actually getting on one of these things for a lot of people my height. And this thing just allows you to do it. You don't have to change the way that you ride. You don't have to change the bike in any way. It's just there. It does its thing, and it does it without you even knowing it's there. Pucker. So what don't we like about the Harley-Davidson Pan America? That's a tricky one. That's a lot harder than asking me what I like about the Pan America, because there isn't a lot to dislike about the bike. I'm not going to go into the styling because one man's Monet is another man's dog turd. But I know it looks different, but Harley had to do something different, didn't they? They had to stand out from the rest of the adventure bike crowd, and they couldn't copy BM, they couldn't copy KTM, so they've gone their own way. And it definitely looks like a Harley. About the only niggle that I can actually find with this thing is that screen adjustment on the adjustable windscreen. It's just a bit tricky to get your hand on. If you're going to give us a windscreen that's adjustable on the fly, make it so easy you can do it without stressing yourself out or having to think about it. The verdict. Harley-Davidson's Pan America. I think it's an absolute gem, to be honest with you. I love the fact that Harley have got into the adventure bike sector. I think it's been a long time coming, and I think a lot of Harley fans who've got the Cruiser and they've got the big full dress tourer, and then they've had to go out and buy another brand's adventure bike to sit in the garage for when they want to do a proper European tour on and off-road. I think it's going to answer a lot of their questions. I was just talking to the guy from Stratstone Harley-Davidson in Wolverhampton who've kindly lent me this bike for the day just to do this video, and he was saying that the UK is pretty much sold out of its allocation of these bikes already. And this is the fourth time that I've tried to get myself down to Stratstone to actually ride this thing, but every time I do it's out on demos, and today has been the only day for about 3 weeks that I've been able to do that. So it just says how in demand this bike is. If you're not a massive fan of the looks of the Pan America, I just implore you to get yourself down to a Harley dealership, take one out for a test ride. You can't see the front end when you sat behind the screen there. And it is a really very impressive bit of kit. It's more than a match for a 1250 GS on the road and off the road. There are more extreme adventure bikes in the field for both on-road and off-road riding, but if you're looking for that real sweet spot between the two, I don't think you can go far wrong with this thing. Anyway, I've been Toad Hancocks for Visordown.com. Thank you to Stratstone Harley-Davidson in Wolverhampton for lending me the bike today to come and do this video, and I will see you all on the next one.